Have you ever come across words so powerful they feel like they're speaking directly to your soul? That's what happens when you read the Wisdom of Rumi. Jalal al-Din. Rumi was not just a poet, he was a mystic, a seeker of truth, and a voice that transcended centuries. His verses aren't just pretty lines, they are living echoes of the human heart, reminders that beneath all our noise and confusion, there's a deeper rhythm waiting to be heard. Rumi's words reach us because they bypass the intellect and go straight into the soul. They remind us that pain is not the end, but a doorway, that love is not weakness, but transformation, and that silence often speaks louder than endless words. In a world drowning in distraction, his wisdom feels like a gentle yet firm hand, guiding us back home, to ourselves. Today, we're going to uncover life lessons drawn from Rumi's timeless poetry, lessons that can awaken your soul, shift your perspective, and remind you of the beauty of being alive. Each one is not just something to listen to, it's an invitation to live differently. So, let's step into the light of Rumi's wisdom and see what truths await us. 1. Follow the call of your heart. So many times in life we find ourselves stuck inside our own heads, tangled in endless cycles of overthinking. You know that voice. It tells you all the reasons why you shouldn't, why it's too risky, why you might fail. But Rumi reminds us, don't get lost in your head. Listen to the whispers of your soul. It's a simple line, yet it carries a power that can change how you live. Because deep down, beneath the noise of doubt and fear, there is a quieter voice, a call from within, that knows the truth of who you are and what you're meant to do. Following your heart doesn't mean ignoring logic or pretending challenges don't exist. It means allowing the deeper part of you, the part that feels alive when you're aligned with purpose, to guide your steps. How many times have you chosen the safe path, only to feel empty afterward? And how many times, even in the smallest ways, have you taken a leap guided by intuition, only to find it brought you closer to something real? That's the difference between living by fear and living by soul. Philosophers and psychologists have echoed this wisdom for centuries. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not who the world tells you to be. The Stoics too believed in living in harmony with your nature, trusting that the inner spark of reason and conscience was your best guide. And Rumi, with his mystical insight, reminds us that the heart is not just an organ, it's a compass pointing you toward the life you were meant to live. But here's the challenge. The heart's voice is soft, while fear shouts loudly. To follow the call of your heart, you must first learn to quiet the noise. This means carving out moments of stillness in your daily life. Moments where you can hear yourself again. Maybe it's through meditation, journaling, a walk in nature, or even sitting silently in your room. When you make space, you begin to notice the subtle nudges of your soul. They won't always make sense, but they will feel true. Think about the turning points in your life, the job you took because it looked good on paper but never satisfied you, the relationship you stayed in because it was comfortable, even though your heart whispered you were meant for more, the opportunities you passed on because you thought you weren't ready. Now imagine what would have happened if you had trusted that inner whisper instead of the loud chatter of doubt. The truth is, the heart rarely misleads. It seeks wholeness, while the mind often seeks safety. Of course, there's risk in following your heart. It might lead you to places unfamiliar, relationships that challenge you, or paths others don't understand. But Rumi would argue, that is exactly the point. Respond to every call that excites your spirit, he wrote, because growth does not live in the comfort zone. The heart calls us into the unknown, not to break us, but to awaken us. Each step outside the walls of fear is a step into the life that is truly yours. And so the question becomes, will you listen? Will you pause long enough to distinguish the whisper of your heart from the noise of your mind? Will you trust yourself enough to take one step, however small, toward the life that excites you? It doesn't have to be a dramatic leap. It could be as simple as signing up for a class you've been drawn to, reaching out to someone who inspires you, or choosing to say yes to what feels right, even if you can't explain why. Rumi's wisdom here is both timeless and practical. If you want a life of depth, meaning, and fulfillment, stop outsourcing your choices to fear, society, or convenience. Follow the call of your heart, because that call isn't just about passion, it's about alignment. It's the path that takes you home to yourself, and the more you follow it, the clearer, stronger, and more unstoppable it becomes. So today, ask yourself, what has my heart been whispering to me that I've been ignoring? And then take one step, just one, in that direction. Because when you listen to your heart, you're not just making a decision, you're choosing to live. 2. Embrace the wounds, they're your teachers. Rumi once wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." At first glance, those words might sound poetic but abstract. Yet if you pause and think about the moments in your life that shaped you most, chances are they weren't the easy ones. They were the heartbreaks, the failures, the rejections, the losses. Pain has a way of cutting us open, but it also has a way of showing us who we really are. Most of us spend our lives trying to run from pain. We distract ourselves, we numb ourselves, we pretend it doesn't exist. Society teaches us to cover our wounds quickly, to smile, to move on. But Rumi invites us to do the opposite, to lean in, to look at the wound, to honor it as a teacher. Because inside every scar lies a lesson that no book, no mentor, no achievement could ever give us. Pain gives birth to wisdom that comfort could never produce. Think about the heartbreak that shattered you. In the middle of it, you probably thought you wouldn't survive. But what did it teach you? Perhaps it showed you the strength you didn't know you had, or the value of loving yourself more deeply before giving your heart away. Think about the failure that embarrassed you. Maybe it closed one door but forced you to grow in ways you never would have if everything had gone right. Pain, when faced honestly, becomes a sculptor. It chisels away the illusions and leaves behind something raw, authentic, and strong. Philosophers across ages understood this paradox. The Stoics, for example, believed that obstacles are not barriers but stepping stones. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the very thing that hurts you can also shape the path forward if you allow it. Modern psychology echoes this through the concept of post-traumatic growth, the idea that individuals often come out of suffering with a deeper sense of meaning, stronger relationships, and a greater appreciation for life. But here's the catch. Growth isn't automatic. Pain itself doesn't guarantee wisdom. What matters is how you respond. Do you become bitter, closing your heart and blaming the world? Or do you stay open, asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" The wound can either imprison you or enlighten you, depending on whether you resist it or embrace it. Let's be real. Embracing wounds isn't comfortable. It requires courage to sit with grief, to acknowledge betrayal, to admit failure. But Rumi suggests that the wound is not your enemy. It is a doorway, When the ego is stripped away through suffering, something deeper can finally emerge. Compassion, patience, humility, resilience. These are not traits learned in textbooks. They are carved into us by life's hardships. Imagine someone who never faced difficulty. Everything came easy to them. They might look successful on the outside, but inside they would lack depth. Compare that to someone who has endured loss, struggled through doubt, fallen and risen again. There's a gravity, a wisdom, a gentleness in their presence. That's what wounds do when you embrace them. They transform you from the inside out. Ask yourself, what wounds am I still carrying, resisting or hiding? What pain do I still see only as a curse instead of a lesson? If you can begin to shift your perspective, to see pain not as punishment but as initiation, then your wounds stop being scars you're ashamed of and start becoming badges of strength. Rumi's words are not an invitation to seek suffering, but to stop running from it. Life will wound us all. It's unavoidable. The question is, will you allow those wounds to open you or close you? Will they break you down, or will they break you open? The light enters through the cracks, but only if you're willing to let it. So today, instead of covering up your pain or pretending it doesn't exist, take a moment to honor it, write about it, reflect on what it's trying to teach you. And remember, your wound is not the end of your story. It may very well be the beginning of a deeper one. 3. Detach from the ego. Rumi once said, "Try to accept changing seasons of life." But behind those words lies a deeper truth. Our biggest prison is not the world around us, but the ego we carry within. The ego is that inner voice that constantly says, me, mine, I. It clings to identity, to status, to being right, to being admired. And the more we attach to it, the more fragile we become. Because the ego always demands control, but life was never meant to be controlled. Think about how much of your suffering comes from the ego. You feel insulted because someone didn't recognize your effort. You get jealous because someone else succeeded faster. You argue endlessly to prove you're right, even when being right doesn't matter. These are not the pains of the soul. They are the pains of the ego. The soul seeks truth and connection, but the ego seeks superiority and validation. And as long as we identify fully with the ego, we will always feel restless, defensive, and unsatisfied. Rumi invites us to loosen that grip. To detach from the ego is not to erase your identity or stop caring about life. It's to recognize that you are more than your titles, more than your possessions, more than the temporary masks you wear. He reminds us that true freedom comes when you no longer have to protect a fragile sense of self, when you don't need to be the smartest in the room, or the wealthiest, or the most admired. You can simply be. Philosophers and spiritual teachers across centuries echoed this wisdom. Epictetus taught that our judgments, not events, disturb us. In other words, it's not what happens, but how your ego reacts that creates suffering. Buddhism, too, points to the illusion of the self, reminding us that attachment to ego is the root of suffering. Modern psychology agrees. Ego inflation creates anxiety and insecurity, while humility and detachment create peace of mind. But here's the paradox. The ego isn't evil. It's part of being human. We need a sense of self to function, to set boundaries, to navigate the world. The problem arises when we confuse the ego with our essence, when we believe that who we are is only the roles we play or the image we project. Detaching from the ego doesn't mean rejecting it. It means seeing it clearly and not letting it rule your life. How do we practice this? Start by noticing your triggers. The next time you feel angry because someone disrespected you, pause and ask, is this my soul speaking or my ego? The next time you compare yourself to someone on social media and feel inadequate, ask, who is feeling threatened, the real me or the image I've built of myself? This simple awareness begins to loosen the ego's grip. Another practice is humility, not the fake kind that hides behind false modesty, but the real kind that acknowledges both your strengths and your limitations. Humility allows you to learn from others without feeling diminished. It allows you to admit mistakes without crumbling, and it allows you to serve others without needing applause. Rumi, in his humility, often described himself as nothing before the vastness of God and creation. In that surrender, he found infinite freedom. When you detach from the ego, life becomes lighter. You stop taking every comment personally. You stop needing to prove yourself at every turn. You begin to listen more, to connect more, to see others not as competitors, but as fellow travelers. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to discover a peace that the ego could never provide, the peace of simply existing as you are, without pretense. Ask yourself, where is my ego keeping me trapped? Is it in my need to be right, my attachment to how others see me, my fear of losing status or control? Then imagine what it would feel like to let that go, not to stop caring about life, but to stop making your self-worth dependent on fragile illusions. That's the freedom Rumi speaks of. So today, take a step back from your ego. Notice when it speaks, but don't let it dictate your choices. Instead, act from the deeper place within you, the soul that seeks truth, not validation. Because in the end, the ego is temporary, but the essence of who you are is eternal. And when you detach from the ego, you don't lose yourself. You find yourself. 4. Dance with life. The whirling metaphor. If you've ever seen the whirling dervishes, you know how mesmerizing it is. They spin in perfect circles, arms open wide, one hand facing the heavens, the other pointing toward the earth, as if channeling something greater than themselves. To many, it looks like a dance, but to Rumi, it was more than a performance. It was a metaphor for life itself, for the soul's movement in harmony with the universe. The dance is not about control, it's about surrender. It's about letting yourself flow with the rhythm of existence rather than resisting it. How often do we do the opposite? We fight against life. We resist change, cling to what's gone, demand that things stay exactly the way we want them to. And in that resistance, we suffer. We become rigid, like a tree refusing to bend in the wind, until the storm finally breaks us. But life was never meant to be controlled in this way. As Rumi's dance shows, life is rhythm, movement, flow. And our task is not to stop the spinning, but to learn how to move with it. The metaphor of the whirling dance is powerful because it teaches balance in the midst of motion. Imagine spinning in circles. If you're stiff, you'll lose balance and fall. But if you surrender, if you soften, if you let the rhythm carry you, you find stability even in motion. Isn't that exactly what life demands of us? To remain centered while everything around us keeps changing. To trust that even in the chaos, there is order, there is meaning, there is music we cannot always hear. Philosophers across traditions echoed this wisdom. Lao Tzu, the Taoist sage, wrote, "Life is a series of natural and spontaneous changes. Don't resist them. That only creates sorrow. Let reality be reality." The Stoics said much the same, urging us to align with nature's flow rather than fight it. Rumi, with his poetic vision, simply gave us an image, the spinning dervish, to remind us that freedom is not in stopping the spin, but in learning to move with grace inside it. Think about your own life. How often have you tried to control everything only to exhaust yourself? How many times have you clung to a plan so tightly that when things shifted, you felt broken? Now think of the times when you let go, when you flowed, when you trusted the process instead of resisting it. Those moments often led to unexpected beauty, didn't they? Maybe you lost a job only to discover a path better suited for you. Maybe a relationship ended, and though it hurt, it opened you to a deeper kind of love later. When you dance with life instead of fighting it, every ending becomes a beginning. But this doesn't mean passivity. Dancing is active. It requires engagement, awareness, and presence. To dance with life means to participate fully, to show up, to move, to adapt, to express. It's not about sitting back and letting fate drag you. It's about choosing to flow with it, to meet its rhythm with your own steps. That's why the dervishes spin, not because they are forced, but because they choose to move in harmony with the universe. The key is staying centered. The whirling dervish keeps his gaze inward, fixed on the heart, so he doesn't lose balance in the spin. Likewise, you must find your inner center. It might be your values, your faith, your sense of purpose. When you stay grounded in what matters, life can spin, change, shift, and you remain steady in the middle of it all. Without that center, the spin of life will toss you around. With it, you can move with grace. Ask yourself, where am I resisting life's dance? Where am I stiff, demanding that things go my way, refusing to bend? What would happen if I softened, trusted, flowed? What if, instead of resisting, I opened my arms like the dervish, one to the heavens, one to the earth, and allowed myself to be carried by the rhythm of existence? Rumi's wisdom here is liberating. To dance with life is to realize you don't need to control every step. You only need to be present in the movement, willing to adapt, willing to trust. And when you do, life stops feeling like a battle and begins to feel like a song. The music is always playing. You just have to decide whether to fight it or to dance. 5. Silence as the language of God. Rumi once said, "Silence is the language of God. All else is poor translation." At first, those words can sound almost mysterious. How could silence be a language? We're used to thinking of communication as words, conversations, explanations. But Rumi challenges us to see beyond that. He reminds us that sometimes the deepest truths cannot be spoken. They can only be felt, lived, and understood in stillness. In our world today, silence feels almost impossible. Noise surrounds us everywhere. Notifications buzzing, voices arguing, news cycles spinning, even our own minds racing with endless thoughts. We've grown so accustomed to filling every moment with sound and chatter that silence feels uncomfortable, even threatening. We grab our phones the moment there's a pause. We turn on music just to avoid the quiet. But here's the paradox. The very thing we avoid is the very thing that can heal us. Silence is not emptiness, it is fullness. It's the space where clarity arises, where the fog of confusion begins to lift. Have you ever noticed that when you're struggling with a problem, the solution doesn't come when you're overthinking? It comes in the quiet moments, maybe in the shower, on a walk, or in the stillness before sleep. That's because silence allows space for the deeper parts of the mind and soul to speak. Philosophers and mystics across traditions recognize this. The Stoics practiced silence as a form of discipline, knowing that words often entangle us in unnecessary conflict. Epictetus warned that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, to listen more than we speak. In Buddhism, silence is considered essential for awakening. Meditation itself is a practice of listening beyond words, and modern psychology affirms this truth. Stillness reduces stress, enhances focus, and creates space for self-awareness. But Rumi goes even further. He suggests silence is the very language of God. Why? Because words can only point to truth, never fully capture it. Every word is a translation, limited and imperfect. But silence, that vast openness within us, is where we encounter the divine directly. It's where the soul feels its connection to something greater, beyond explanation. In silence, we stop performing, stop pretending, and simply are. And in that being, we touch eternity. Think about your own life. How often do you truly sit in silence, not with a podcast playing, not scrolling your phone, not planning the next thing, but just being? When was the last time you allowed yourself to listen, not to the world, but to the quiet beneath the world? It's in those moments that you begin to hear what you've been ignoring, your true feelings, your hidden fears, your unspoken desires, and maybe, if you listen deeply enough, the whisper of God. The challenge is that silence can feel uncomfortable at first. When you sit quietly, all the thoughts you've been suppressing rise to the surface. The regrets, the doubts, the pain, they all show up. That's why most people run from silence. But if you stay, if you breathe through it, you'll notice something amazing. Beneath the noise of your thoughts, there is a deeper silence that holds you. A silence that is not empty, but alive, vast and calming. That's the silence Rumi calls the language of God. So how do we practice this? Start small. Take 5 minutes each day to sit quietly. No distractions, no agenda, just stillness. At first your mind will chatter. That's okay. Let it. Imagine your thoughts as clouds passing by, but you remain the sky, still and spacious. Over time, you'll begin to touch that deeper silence, and once you taste it, you'll realize it was always there, waiting. Silence also teaches us in relationships. So often, we rush to fill the air with words, to prove our point, to defend ourselves. But sometimes the most powerful response is silence, not the cold silence of withdrawal, but the compassionate silence of presence. When someone is hurting, words may not heal, but your silent presence can. When conflict rises, silence can prevent escalation and allow understanding to emerge. Rumi's wisdom invites us to stop fearing silence and to begin honoring it as sacred. Because in silence, we remember what really matters. We remember that life is not about constant noise, constant validation, or constant distraction. It's about depth, presence, and connection to something greater than ourselves. So ask yourself, when was the last time I truly sat in silence? And what am I afraid I might hear if I did? If you can face that fear, if you can embrace the stillness, you'll discover what Rumi meant. That silence is not just the absence of sound, it is the presence of God. 6. Love as the path to transformation. If there is one word that captures the essence of Rumi's teachings, it is love. For him, love was not just an emotion, not just romance, not even limited to the love between two people. Love, in Rumi's vision, was the force of transformation itself, the fire that burns away the false self, the light that awakens the soul, the path that leads us closer to truth. He wrote, "Through love, all pain will turn to medicine." In those words, you find the heart of his message. Love is not weakness, love is power. Yet the modern world often misunderstands love. We reduce it to fleeting attraction, to surface-level passion, to something we either fall into or fall out of. But Rumi saw love as something much deeper. It is not something that happens to you. It is something you embody, something you cultivate, something you choose. Real love, the kind that transforms, asks more of us than comfort. It demands surrender, vulnerability, and courage. Think about the times in your life when love changed you. Maybe it was the love of a parent who believed in you when you doubted yourself. Maybe it was the love of a friend who stayed by your side through your darkest hour. Maybe it was a romantic love that forced you to confront your own fears and insecurities. Or perhaps it was the love you learned to give yourself after years of neglecting your worth. In every case, love had the power to shape you, to stretch you, to awaken something greater within you. Philosophers and mystics across ages agreed with this vision. Plato described love as the force that draws the soul upward toward beauty and truth. The Stoics saw love not as attachment, but as a recognition of our shared humanity, a way to live in harmony with others. Even modern psychology points to love as one of the most powerful catalysts for growth. Research on attachment, compassion, and positive psychology shows that love deepens resilience, heals trauma, and expands our sense of meaning. But here's the paradox. Love transforms us not because it always feels good, but because it challenges us. Love exposes the ego's illusions. It forces us to face our selfishness, our fears, our defenses. To love truly is to open yourself to risk, the risk of rejection, the risk of loss, the risk of change. And yet, it is in that risk that transformation happens. As Rumi wrote, "Love is the bridge between you and everything." Through love, we cross the gap between who we think we are and who we are meant to be. So what does it mean to walk the path of love in daily life? It means treating love not as something you wait to receive, but as something you choose to give. It means approaching others with compassion rather than judgment, with curiosity rather than assumptions, with forgiveness rather than resentment. It means softening when the ego wants to harden, listening when pride wants to speak, reaching out when fear wants to withdraw. And perhaps most importantly, it means loving yourself, not in a shallow, indulgent way, but in a way that honors your worth, your growth, and your potential. Too many people demand love from the outside while denying it to themselves. But Rumi reminds us that the soul itself is made of love, and the more you nurture that within, the more naturally it flows outward. When you learn to love yourself fully, you no longer cling desperately to others for validation. You meet them as equals, whole to whole, soul to soul. Of course, love doesn't remove life's difficulties, but it changes how we face them. With love, pain becomes bearable, even transformative. With love, loss becomes a reminder of how deeply we've lived. With love, even the smallest acts, listening to a child, offering kindness to a stranger, forgiving an enemy, become sacred steps on the path. So ask yourself, am I living a life rooted in love, or am I letting fear and ego dictate my choices? Where in my life can I allow love to transform me? Maybe it's in a relationship that needs forgiveness. Maybe it's in the way you speak to yourself when you make mistakes. Maybe it's in choosing compassion over judgment, even when judgment feels easier. Rumi's wisdom is clear. Love is not optional. It is the very essence of the journey. Without love, we remain stuck in our smallness. With love, we awaken to the vastness of life itself. So today, choose love, not just the kind that comforts, but the kind that transforms. Because through love, you will not only change yourself, you will change the world around you. 7. Let go of control. One of the hardest lessons life keeps teaching us is this: you are not in control of everything. Yet we resist this truth with all our might. We plan, We cling, we manipulate, we try to bend reality to our will. And every time something slips through our fingers, as it inevitably does, we feel anger, frustration, or despair. Rumi, with his timeless wisdom, offers us a different perspective. Try to accept changing seasons of life. These few words remind us that just as nature shifts through cycles we cannot command, our lives also move through seasons we must learn to embrace. The desire for control is deeply human. It comes from fear, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of loss, the fear of vulnerability. We think that if we can control outcomes, we can avoid pain. But paradoxically, this desperate grip often creates more suffering than the events themselves. Imagine holding sand too tightly in your hand. The harder you squeeze, the faster it slips away. Control works the same way. Philosophers across traditions have spoken of this truth. The Stoics distinguished between what is within our control, our thoughts, choices, and actions, and what is not, everything else. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." Buddhism teaches the same principle. Attachment and grasping create suffering, while letting go leads to freedom. And Rumi, through poetry, gave us the spiritual version of this wisdom. Life is a river, always flowing. You can exhaust yourself trying to dam it up, or you can learn to flow with it. Think about the times you tried to control outcomes. Maybe it was a relationship. You tried to force someone to love you, to stay, to be who you wanted them to be. But people are not possessions, and love cannot be caged. Maybe it was your career. You planned every step perfectly, only for unexpected events to derail everything. And maybe it was your own self. You tried to suppress emotions, deny weakness, and maintain a perfect image until the mask cracked. In every case, control didn't protect you. It only delayed the inevitable lesson. Life moves according to its own rhythm. But letting go of control does not mean apathy or passivity. It doesn't mean giving up responsibility or drifting aimlessly. It means learning the art of surrender. It means doing your best with what is in your hands, your effort, your discipline, your choices, and then releasing attachment to results. It means showing up fully, but without the illusion that you can command every outcome. There is freedom in this surrender. When you stop fighting against reality, you conserve energy for what truly matters. Instead of wasting hours in worry about what might happen, you invest in what you can do right now. Instead of clinging to what is slipping away, you open yourself to new possibilities. Instead of resisting change, you align with it. That's why Rumi said, "Try to accept changing seasons of life, because life is always changing, whether you accept it or not." The question is whether you will break against that change or bend with it gracefully. Modern psychology even supports this. Research shows that people who practice acceptance cope better with stress, have stronger resilience, and recover faster from setbacks. Acceptance doesn't mean liking everything that happens. It means acknowledging reality without fighting it. And in that acknowledgement, you find clarity, peace, and strength to respond wisely. Ask yourself, where in my life am I clinging too tightly? Is it in a relationship where I fear letting go? A career path that no longer aligns with who I am? A vision of myself that I outgrew long ago? What would happen if I loosened my grip even a little? What if, instead of demanding certainty, I embraced mystery? Letting go of control is terrifying at first. It feels like stepping into emptiness. But Rumi reminds us that what feels like emptiness is actually fullness. It's space for growth, for newness, for grace to enter. As he wrote, "Try to accept changing seasons of life." because every season, even the difficult ones, carries its own wisdom. So today, practice releasing one thing you cannot control. Maybe it's someone else's opinion of you. Maybe it's the pace of your progress. Maybe it's the outcome of something you've worked for. Do your part, give your best, and then release it into the flow of life. Because true strength is not in controlling everything. It is in trusting that you don't have to. 8. Seek companionship that elevates you. Rumi once wrote, "Set your life on fire. Seek those who fan your flames." Few lines capture the importance of relationships so clearly. He understood something timeless, that the people around you shape the quality of your life more than you realize. Their words, their energy, their beliefs, their habits, they seep into your soul like air into your lungs. If you surround yourself with people who uplift you, challenge you, and inspire you, your inner fire grows. But if you stay among those who drain you, belittle you, or keep you small, your flame flickers and fades. We like to think we are independent, that we make choices on our own. But human beings are deeply social. Our environment influences us constantly, often in ways we don't notice. Psychology calls this social contagion, the phenomenon where emotions, behaviors, and even attitudes spread unconsciously through groups. If your friends complain all the time, chances are you'll start complaining too. If your circle avoids growth, you'll be pulled toward mediocrity. But if you walk with those who dream, who act, who grow, you will naturally rise with them. This is why Rumi's words still resonate centuries later. He wasn't just speaking poetically, he was giving us a blueprint for transformation. If you want to change your life, change the company you keep. Fire grows brighter when it meets other flames. But place it among damp logs, and even the strongest fire struggles to burn. Philosophers and thinkers throughout history echoed this truth. Aristotle said, "Man is by nature a social animal." He believed that friendship rooted in virtue was essential for a good life. The Stoics, too, advised carefully choosing companions who embody wisdom and strength. Seneca wrote, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you." Modern psychology agrees. Studies show that our closest relationships directly impact not only our mental health but also our physical health, career success, and sense of purpose. Think about the people in your life right now. Who lifts you higher? Who drains you? Who fans your flame? And who smothers it? Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. Maybe you realize that the people you spend the most time with are keeping you stuck in old patterns. Maybe you feel the weight of negativity every time you leave a certain conversation. And maybe, deep down, you know you need to step away, not out of cruelty, but out of love for your own growth. Rumi's wisdom is not about arrogance or cutting people off harshly. It's about discernment. It's about recognizing that your soul needs nourishing, not poisoning. You cannot pour your energy endlessly into relationships that diminish you and still expect to thrive. Nor can you cling to those who fear your growth and expect to rise. To seek companionship that elevates you is to honor both yourself and the people who are truly aligned with your journey. But this doesn't mean you only seek people who agree with you or comfort you. Elevating relationships are not always easy. They challenge you, confront you, and push you to grow. A true friend is not the one who flatters your ego, but the one who calls you higher, even when it's uncomfortable. They are the ones who see your potential when you forget it, who remind you of your strength when you doubt, who stand with you when the world turns cold. Ask yourself, who in my life fans my flames? Who helps me remember who I am? And just as importantly, whose flame am I fanning? Because it's not just about receiving, it's about giving too. The more you uplift others, the more you surround yourself with a circle of mutual growth, a community where everyone rises together. So maybe the invitation here is twofold. Release the relationships that keep you small and invest deeply in those that call you higher. Seek mentors who inspire, friends who challenge, partners who believe, and become, in turn, the kind of person who elevates others. Rumi's wisdom is a reminder that life is too short to spend with those who dim your light. Choose your companions wisely, because in the end, your fire can only grow when it is surrounded by others who protect it, nurture it, and help it blaze into its fullest expression. 9. The journey back to yourself. Rumi taught us a truth that is as simple as it is profound. Every path, no matter how far it takes you, eventually leads back to yourself. He believed that the greatest pilgrimage is not to distant lands or holy sites, but inward, into the hidden chambers of your own soul. The universe is not outside of you, he wrote. Look inside yourself. Everything that you want, you already are. In our search for meaning, we often look outward. We chase success, approval, possessions, experiences. We think happiness lies in the next achievement, the next relationship, the next goal, and yet, after reaching them, how often do we still feel a lingering emptiness? That's because the outer world can never fully satisfy the hunger of the soul. The soul longs for home, and that home is within. The journey back to yourself is not easy. It requires stripping away illusions. Illusions about who you are supposed to be. Illusions about what others expect of you. Illusions about what you think will make you worthy. It asks you to stand naked before your own truth, to confront both the light and the shadows within. And that takes courage. Many people spend their whole lives running from themselves, filling the silence with distractions, because they fear what they'll find if they look inward. But Rumi insists, what you fear is where your treasure lies. The cracks inside you are not signs of weakness, but openings to deeper understanding. When you journey inward, you discover that your deepest wounds carry wisdom, that your darkest nights reveal resilience, and that your true self is far greater than the masks you wear. Philosophers and spiritual traditions have echoed this again and again. Socrates declared, "Know thyself." The Stoics believed self-examination was the foundation of wisdom. Buddhism teaches that enlightenment is not found outside, but through awakening the mind within. Even modern psychology insists on the importance of self-awareness. Without it, we repeat patterns blindly, trapped by wounds we don't understand. Think about your own life. How often do you turn inward to truly listen to yourself? Not the chatter of the ego, not the endless worries of the mind, but the deeper current beneath it all. When was the last time you sat with your own thoughts, your own feelings, without judgment or distraction? If you have, you know how difficult it can be, but you also know how freeing it is. In those rare moments of honesty, you realize that you already hold the answers you've been seeking outside. The journey back to yourself is not about isolation or selfishness. It is about wholeness. When you know yourself, you're no longer swayed so easily by the opinions of others. You stop chasing validation. You stop living someone else's script. You begin to walk your own path, rooted in authenticity. And from that place, you can love more deeply, give more freely, and live more fully. Rumi reminds us that the soul is vast, far greater than we imagine. He often described it as an ocean, deep, mysterious, infinite. To journey inward is to dive into that ocean, to discover that you are not a small drop in the sea, but the sea itself. And once you know this, your perspective shifts. You stop feeling separate, isolated, or incomplete. You realize that you are connected to everything. So ask yourself, Am I living from the surface, or am I connected to the depths of who I really am? What masks am I still wearing? What fears keep me from facing myself honestly? These questions are not easy, but they are essential. Because until you know yourself, everything else in life will feel unsteady. The journey back to yourself is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong practice. Every challenge, every joy, every relationship is an opportunity to return home again, to remember who you are beneath the noise. And each time you return, you come back stronger, clearer, more alive. Rumi's wisdom is simple, yet revolutionary. Stop searching outside for what can only be found within. The path you are walking, no matter where it takes you, will eventually lead you back to yourself. The sooner you embrace that journey, the sooner you will discover the peace you've been chasing all along. 10. Awakening the Soul. As we reach the end of this journey through Rumi's wisdom, it's worth pausing to take in the depth of what we've uncovered. These were never meant to be just poetic verses sitting neatly on a page or recited for their beauty. They were meant to be lived, to be embodied, to be tested against the challenges and joys of daily life. Rumi did not write for scholars. He wrote for souls, souls like yours, who are struggling, growing, searching, longing for more than the surface of life. Think back to what we've explored together, the call of the heart, the reminder that your deepest truth is not found in logic alone, but in the quiet whisper within you, urging you toward authenticity. The embrace of wounds, seeing that pain is not a curse, but a doorway through which light enters, shaping you into someone deeper and wiser. The detachment from ego, realizing that the prison we often live in is self-made, and that freedom comes not from inflating ourselves, but from letting go. The dance with life, learning to move with the rhythm of existence instead of fighting it, finding balance in motion rather than clinging to stillness. The sacredness of silence, discovering that the divine is not always heard in words, but often in the stillness between them. The transformative power of love, understanding that love is not just emotion, but the very path of becoming, the fire that purifies and awakens, the surrender of control, accepting that life has seasons you cannot command, and that true strength lies in flowing with them. The companionship that elevates, choosing to walk with those who fan your flame rather than smother it. And finally, the journey back to yourself, realizing that everything you seek outside has always been within you. Taken together, these are not separate lessons. They are threads in a single tapestry, each weaving into the next, each guiding you back to one central truth. The soul is vast, eternal, and already connected to everything. Rumi's wisdom is not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you already are. But here's the challenge. You cannot just nod along and admire these words. You must live them. Philosophy, poetry, spirituality. They mean nothing if they remain trapped in thought. They come alive only when practiced, when you actually pause to listen to your heart instead of your fear, when you look at your pain and ask what it's teaching you instead of numbing it away, when you resist the ego's temptation to prove yourself and instead choose humility and presence. When you embrace silence rather than running from it, when you love, not because it's safe, but because it's true, when you let go of control and trust the unfolding seasons of your life, when you walk with people who bring out the best in you, and you, in turn, do the same for them, when you finally, courageously sit with yourself and realize that home was never out there, it was always here, inside you. Rumi's wisdom is both gentle and fierce. Gentle because it invites you with beauty, poetry, and tenderness. fierce because it demands transformation. To live his words is to risk change, to risk leaving behind the familiar illusions, the comforts of ego, the false securities of control. But in that risk lies the only real reward: awakening your soul. So the invitation today is simple, yet powerful. Choose one of Rumi's lessons and live it. Just one. Maybe it's 5 minutes of silence. Maybe it's forgiving a wound you've carried. Maybe it's reaching out to someone who lifts you higher. Maybe it's daring to follow a whisper of your heart. You don't need to do everything at once. Transformation begins in small, deliberate steps. And as you take those steps, remember Rumi's reminder: the wound is the place where the light enters you. Don't be afraid of the cracks, the struggles, the uncertainties. They are not signs of failure. They are signs that life is working on you, shaping you, preparing you. If you let them, they will become the very places where grace, wisdom, and love enter. In the end, Rumi's wisdom is not about escaping the world, but about engaging it differently. It's about moving from fear to love, from control to trust, from noise to silence, from ego to soul. And if you walk this path, even imperfectly, you will awaken to a life that feels deeper, truer, and infinitely more alive. So as you close your eyes tonight, ask yourself, which lesson will I carry into tomorrow? And as you rise tomorrow, live it, not as theory, but as truth. Because every step you take toward awakening your soul is a step toward becoming the person you were always meant to be.